Thank you very much for having me here. It's an honor to be here. What I'm going to talk to you about today is using small flying cameras to report news. When I started the drone journalism lab at the University of Nebraska in November of 2011, this was an idea that many people hadn't really thought about. And the idea of using drones had a much different connotation. Drones had a very military and sort of a bad reputation, and the word meant something very, very different than what it means now. And when I talk about drones, I am absolutely not talking about military hardware. What I'm talking about is something like this. And I brought one with me here, and I've been through a lot of airport security back rooms and got my luggage searched in the United States, so I brought it all this way. I might as well try it out. This is a DJI Phantom 2. DJI is a Chinese company. They're making these a lot. I heard somewhere they're selling like 8,000 or 9,000 of them a day over the world. DJI just recently got a round of venture funding, which values the company at $8 billion. So they've gone from one guy's idea to a massive company in very, very quick order. So to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, this is it. And I've actually got the camera on so we can, so I can get the video later. These devices weigh just a couple kilos. They will fly for about 20 minutes. They can go as high as they need to go. We've modified this one to have a stabilizing camera gimbal on it, and it will have also video transmitters, so we could get live video to a screen, which is back in my hotel room, so not really doing me any good right now. They are pretty easy to fly. It doesn't take much time to learn how, but as you can hear, those blades are spinning very, very fast. And so for as easy as they are to fly, and for as much fun, it takes a little bit of practice. Those blades do spin fast. If I were to stick my hand down here while the blades were spinning, I would most likely get all of my fingers back, but I would be going to a hospital and I would need a lot of stitches. So there is a safety issue, and I always remember to turn it off, so I don't want it to fly away here. So with this simple device, with a device that will fly for about 20 minutes, what can we do? Well, it opens up new opportunities. This is a GIF that I made last night from a video that a student of mine did in Africa. This is in Kenya. And this animal is one of the most endangered animals in the world right now. The horn of the black rhino is being sold on the black market for about $9,000 an ounce. And because of that, poachers are killing them at an unbelievable rate. Ben, my student, would have never been able to get this close to this animal without this device. So he's able to fly right up close to rhinos, elephants, giraffes. The giraffes were actually amazing. They were very, very curious. The elephants, big, powerful elephants, would run away. As soon as they heard it, they were gone. The giraffes would stop and turn around and look, and they would walk closer and closer and closer, and Ben had to back up. He's like, whoa, hey guys, I don't want to clip your nose here. So Ben was trying very, very hard to be safe with these devices, and it opened up a whole different view of African wildlife that we wouldn't have had before. For media, they become an incredible production tool. This is a one-of-a-kind site in the world, and it happens to be about 3 hours away from my house in Nebraska. This is a fossil bed in Royal, Nebraska, where a volcano covered a pond that had prehistoric rhinos, horses, and deer, different animals, about 12 million years ago. and these fossils are preserved almost perfectly in that ash. Well, it's in an indoor structure, and I was able to fly that drone right there over top of it. The problem is that ash is still ash, so it's like powder. And if I got too low, I would create this giant cloud, and I would be blowing dust all over these fossils that these scientists here had spent years uncovering. So they really didn't want me to do that. So I had to fly right on the ceiling the whole time that I was in there. And I was so worried that I was going to hit something on the ceiling and send that device crashing down on top of priceless 12-million-year-old fossils. So it becomes a tool for us as storytellers to get different angles. No one had ever seen these fossils from the air like this before. These scientists who had spent decades doing this were like children when they came over and were watching this video. They were just absolutely amazed. So we can provide perspective on things that we have never done before. Where I'm interested in these devices is actually as tools of data journalism. This is a three-dimensional model of a dump site in Nairobi. It's called the Dandara dump, and it was not supposed to be there. The government just let it go when Nairobi was much smaller. Nairobi has grown around this dump now, and the government is trying to clean it up, but they don't really know what to do. If I had access to a browser, I could show you that you can actually fly through this model. You can be the drone and go all around and see what's going on in here. And if any of you want to see it afterwards, I'm happy to show it to you. You can fly down this fence here that was supposed to contain it, but as you can see, it hasn't done the job. You can fly down the Nairobi River. Because it's a digital file, because it's a model, we're able to annotate it. This right here is a school, as is this. So they're immediately adjacent to this dump, and all of this trash blows into the school's playgrounds all day long, and these children have to play amidst the trash. What it also offers us is opportunities to inform our audiences, and especially in cases where there is a large spatial extent. There's a large area to be covered. That's where these devices really shine, when you have a large area. This is from Nepal, from the recent earthquake. There was actually another earthquake in Nepal this morning, a 7.4 magnitude that was epicenter near Everest. So a lot of buildings that were damaged in the last earthquake have collapsed today, and I'm afraid of what the news is going to hold. But in this photo that I'll show you here, there are multiple worries that come up. Because honestly, when you put a flying camera in the air, you start to expose problems that can emerge, that as journalists we haven't thought through yet, that we have not had to confront before. Same image, same look. This video, this is a still frame from the video, was shot by an amateur, just somebody who had a drone in Nepal, and they gave this footage to a bunch of different news organizations. And what they did was, they flew in this general direction. But as you can see, they're flying over large crowds all around here, and they flew directly over people's heads. That is a terrible idea. If this device were to have a problem, if a motor were to go out, if the electronics were to give way, that device is going to come tumbling down. This weighs about 2 kilos. If it fell out of the sky and hit you in the head, it would hurt, but it would probably not kill you. There's a device over there that another news organization here is using called an Inspire One, same company. It weighs about twice as much, actually 3 times as much. It weighs about 6 pounds. I'm not going to be able to do the conversion in my head, but it's significantly heavier. If that thing were several hundred feet in the air and were able to achieve terminal velocity and hit somebody in the head, somebody could die. If you have a densely packed crowd, somebody will die. No news organization on the planet wants to be a part of that. So we cannot be flying over dense crowds like this until these devices become much more safe and more reliable. But this isn't the only risk in this one image. This is a heritage site to the Nepalese government. The Nepalese government is concerned and continues to be concerned that a lot of these historical locations that have been damaged in Nepal are now open to antiquities thieves, and they're going to steal them and they're going to appear on the black market. This guy flies directly over one of these sites. And between all of this, between people flying over people's heads, between these antiquity sites, and between the sheer number of foreign media that were bringing drones to Nepal, the Nepalese government moved in and banned drones. This is particularly disappointing to me because I was supposed to be leaving a week from tomorrow for Nepal to do a bunch of drone work, and now I can't go. The Nepalese government said that the reason they are restricting drone use is to protect these heritage sites. What I have been told by Nepalese journalists is that the government was concerned with foreign media using drones in Nepal, that people were complaining about the number of drone flights that were going on and drone flights in proximity to them that were close to them, and it was worrying them. I'm afraid that Nepal is only going to be the first example of this, that other governments are going to do the same, that we're going to see this again and again when there are large disasters and a lot of foreign media move in. This Nepal earthquake was one of the first that media were truly aware of drones and their power, and they came and immediately triggered a ban. And I'm worried that's going to happen again. There are more worries than this. Each country and each society has their own ideas of what privacy is and how to protect it. The Europeans have a particular sense of privacy that's different from the Chinese, which is different from the Indians, which is different from the Middle East. Journalists who are operating in an international context are going to have to become very, very aware of this, or they're going to become very unwelcome in the place that they are. Each country has their own laws when it regards private property and whether or not you can fly over private property. Overflight of private property has actually been a problem since 1680, when the first hot air balloons went up in Paris and started flying over places. Lawyers in France immediately recognized a problem because going back to the age of the Romans, the idea was if you owned land, you owned the skies above it to the heavens. The advent of commercial aviation, the advent of balloons in the 1680s pretty much eliminated that. We would not be able to have commercial air travel if that were still the truth. The question becomes, where does private property end? Where do your rights extend into the air? And is that standard across the globe? It is absolutely not. Also not standard in the globe right now is aviation regulation. Every country has their own rules. Here in Dubai, if you want to use a drone for commercial use, you have to apply for a permit from the Civil Aviation Authority. If you are using it for television production, the Civil Aviation Authority has you go to the Film and Television Commission and ask them for permission. If they sign off on it, then the Civil Aviation Authority will issue you a permit. It takes days, from what I understand. So in a breaking news context, it becomes very, very difficult to use a drone. And as rules go around the world, this is fantastic. This is actually really good. The United States, I can argue that the United States is the worst in the world when it comes to drone regulations. In order for me to use a drone in the United States as a commercial entity, I have to be a manned aircraft pilot. I am going to have to learn how to fly a manned aircraft in order to fly this, which I can fly right now, and it's not a problem. I'm going to have to spend $6,500 to get a license to fly a 2-kilo hunk of plastic. The reason I'm saying this is because I start pilot training when I get back, and I'm sort of not looking forward to it. To get a permit from the FAA in the United States, it's going to take 3 months, and I have to be a pilot, and that's just not a workable solution. The other concern I have is that our codes of ethics across our disciplines may not have caught up to this just yet. The idea that we can now put a camera in the air is reflected in some of our ethics codes, but not all of them. And we need to think about when we want to use these devices and how we want to use them. Because the issue right now is if we abuse these devices, if we use them improperly, governments are going to shut us down. Governments the world over are going to shut us down. So we are going to have to think very hard about when and how and why we're going to use these devices. I can tell you this. For these devices to become accepted around the world by civil aviation authorities, by the people that we want to report on, we have to do it safely, and we have to do it with compassion. We cannot be hovering over the heads of grieving people. We cannot be doing things that put people in danger. We cannot be irresponsible, or things are going to be shut down very, very quickly. If you have any questions, I am more than delighted to talk to you about them afterwards. Thank you very much for having me here. I really appreciate it. Oh, we can do Q&A? Okay, we got time for Q&A. Is there anybody that has any questions? Yes.
Toys that they sell commercially for children to fly drones.
So most civil aviation authorities take the stance that anything that is designed to fly in the air is an aircraft. So in my office right now, I have a little quadcopter. It's as big as my palm of my hand. It's $30. I bought it off the internet. It's a toy. My 8-year-old son loves to fly it. To the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration in the United States, it's a drone, and it requires a manned aircraft license in order to fly it, which is ridiculous. A lot of countries now, Canada, Australia, some places in the Eurozone, they're starting to recognize that there are not enough government regulators in the world to regulate devices as small as this. So a lot of places are doing away with regulations on devices that are smaller than 2 kilos. So for journalists, the toys are fun, but they're not going to be a useful tool for production. But the rules don't change. If you've got a really small one and you're using it, the Civil Aviation Authority in your country is going to want you to have a permit, most likely, if you have rules. Not every country does. So we're sort of in this stage right now where the rules don't make a lot of sense because the law never can keep up with technology. Technology is moving so much faster than our laws can, and these devices are changing so rapidly that the law can't hope to keep up. So you have these kind of silly situations where you have governments regulating toys the same way that they would a large aircraft. So, others? Yes. Could you use the microphone so I can hear you?
About the risks and the problems you talk about, we remember last month that 2 Al Jazeera correspondents in Paris has been fined and persecuted because of using the drones to have a photo of something. What about the United States? Could you please tell us about the same thing?
Yep.
Okay. What about the United States and for using the drones as the means of getting news?
In the U.S. right now, the answer is no. If you ask the government if you can use them, they'll say no. Then they'll say, okay, if you can get a specific type of permit from the government, you can use them. If you are having trouble sleeping, I can bore you to death with details here. But what it amounts to is you have to apply for a permit. That permit will take 3 months. You have to be a pilot in order to use them. And even then, it's not guaranteed that you're going to get the permit. If you just say, to heck with that, I'm just going to go use one and go fly and get video. What will happen is the FAA will send you a letter, and that letter will say, don't do that again. It's called a cease and desist order, but the amount that amounts to don't do that. There's no fine, no prosecution, anything like that. The letter just comes and they say, don't do it. If you do it again, we might have to come after you. The FAA has asserted that it has the authority to fine a pilot $10,000 per flight. So if you flew it 5 times, you would be liable for $50,000 in fines. They have only ever fined somebody once, and that fine was contested in court, and they actually won at a lower court. They lost at an appeals court. He ended up paying $1,000 and walked away. There is no authority to jail anyone on these. Now, that's not necessarily the whole story. If you're doing something that is endangering people, if you are doing things that are reckless, there are local laws that you could be arrested for, but they have nothing to do with the drone. They have much more to do with the endangering. But the federal government does not have the authority to put people in jail, as far as I know, for flying a drone. But you will face about $10,000 in fines per flight. The honest truth is, the US is a very, very big place, and there are lots of people who have these, and there are lots of people who are using them every day, and no one's getting caught. So the likelihood that you would run into trouble is very, very slim. But as journalists, we need to be conscious of the fact that to be ethical, we need to follow the law. And we cannot claim to be ethical people, to be following professional standards, if we are going around and flouting the law. So you have to consider that in your decision making. But the reality on the ground is very, very different. So yes. You want to take them? Oh, sorry.
Professor, في مترجم? There is a translator? No, it's okay. يعني تحدثت عن ترجمين ولا هم؟ اوكي. تحدثت عن صعوبات كثيرة في مسألة صحافة الطائرات، وهذا فعلا يفتح الباب أمام صعوبات أخرى يواجهها أي صحفي. وتحدثت عن وجود كثير من الطائرات، يعني يمكن الموضوع هذا بشكل عام. كيف يمكن للصحفي أن يمارس عمله سواء بصحافة الطائرات أو بصحافة أخرى من غير أن يدخل في هذا البروسيس الطويل من التصاريح يعني هل ممكن أنه يمارس بطريقة يعني ممكن نسميها ملتفة؟ أعيد السؤال. تحدثت عن صحافة الطائرات، موضوع جميل. أنا أتساءل عن موضوع أكثر عموم، يعني بشكل عام. هل وجود التصاريح الطويلة هذه هي أهم بالنسبة للصحفي أم أنه يؤدي أو يوضح خبر عاجل جدا؟ لأن تتحدث عن كثير من المتطلبات عشان تطير طائرة.
Yes. At least now, there are a lot of news situations that are not going to be possible until the law catches up with the technology. It's going to take time for this to really come into its full potential. Primarily right now, it's going to be useful as a more long-term production tool. So you have a story that takes more time. You have days or weeks or months to work on it. But if there were a building that would start on fire outside right now, there's just no way. Many countries are moving toward a system that will allow for breaking news, that would allow for us to use them on a moment's notice. It requires certification. You'll have to register the device. You'll have to do a number of different things. But once that happens, it becomes very possible. In the US, there have been rules that have been proposed that will not go into effect until 2017, maybe spring of 2017 at the earliest, that will allow for these devices to be used immediately. But we're 2 years away from that. The United States tends to be a driver of aviation regulation around the world. This is one notable instant where they are well behind the rest of the world. In Canada right now, you can take that device and you can go fly it and you can use it for news, so long as you are outside of a city. In Australia, you can do the same thing. In a lot of countries, you could do it because it's small. It's a weight-based system. They call it a risk-based system. It's essentially what's the likelihood that you're going to hurt someone if it goes wrong. And these smaller devices, the risk is much, much lower. So it's going to take time for these systems to come in place. I would like journalists to do something that they are unaccustomed to doing, which is advocating on their own behalf with their governments for the ability to use these devices. I have advocated in the United States for journalists to tell the government, we want to use these devices, we want to use them for news, we believe we have a free press right to that, a First Amendment right to that, and here's how we believe that. I think journalists around the world should be doing that because I think these are a marvelous tool. But in order to do that, we're going to have to show that we can do it responsibly. And that's why I view this time that we're in right now, where it's difficult and it takes time, as not so much of as a bad thing as a good thing, because it gives us time to think about how we would use these in a breaking situation, in a short situation. It also gives us time to practice, to get better, to show the civil aviation authorities that we can do this without endangering people, that we can do it without hurting people, and that opens up opportunities later on. So, yes. Is there last question. I'm sorry. I'll be happy to answer. Oh, you're back there. Yes.
Hi, Matt.
Yes.
Just my question about the news organization. Do you know if there is any guidelines or, let's say, ethics have been issued for using drones for news coverage?
There is not. And I believe we should have one. I would love to see a global conversation begin about this. That was one of the things that we had set out to do in the drone journalism lab at the University of Nebraska, was to start to encapsulate some of these ideas into a standard of practice, a code that would say, this is okay, this is not, this is a good idea, this is not. When I talk about the situation in the United States, I talk from experience because these letters that they send, I have one. We were the first drone journalism lab at any journalism school in the world. We were the first to get a cease and desist order from the FAA shutting us down. So I know very, very well what the rules are now, and I misinterpreted the rules before. I'm hoping that we will get back in the air in August. And I hope that we will, if you go to dronejournalismlab.org, we write about this stuff all the time. We're putting stuff out there. But honestly, I think there needs to be a global conversation about this. Because of where I live, I'm primarily interested in the United States. I talk a lot about the United States. I keep my eye on the rest of the world as much as I can, but it's a big world. And every country has their own situation. I would love to see an organized global conversation around this for journalists to begin talking about this across borders, because the civil aviation authorities are doing that now. They are beginning to get organized. They are beginning to establish standard rules. What I was saying before in a conversation, the world right now is in the exact same place that it was in the post-war era when it comes to manned commercial aviation. The world was a patchwork of laws and regulations, and it wasn't until about about 1920 that we started thinking, well, hold on, if somebody wants to fly from Paris to Berlin, they'll have two different sets of rules. How do we standardize that? And World War II kind of made that difficult to organize. So it wasn't until the post-war period that we really got serious about establishing global standards for aviation. And this is why you can fly from Dubai to Amsterdam to Minneapolis to Lincoln and have a standard set of rules. We do not have that now when it comes to these small devices. civil aviation authorities all over the world are beginning to grapple with this, and it is the right time for journalists to be in a place to say, hey, we want a seat at the table, we want to tell you about how we want to use these devices and how we think we can do it safely. How to do that, I have no idea. I would love to talk to you about it. Yes. Yes, it is a GoPro. For devices of this size, the GoPro Hero 4 that can shoot in 4K, there are larger devices that can carry larger cameras. There are devices that can carry a full-scale digital SLR. So there are miniaturized helicopters that can carry Cineflex cameras. So whatever camera you want to put on one, there's a drone depending on your budget. So thank you very much. I very much appreciate it. If you'd like to talk to me afterward, I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you.